Year 8 and welcome to this week's drama lesson. So this week you are going to be doing a fair bit of practical work. So you will need to make sure that you can see yourself. Now that will require either a mirror or some kind of camera, webcam, phone camera, or something like that, and you will need a reasonably clear piece of space to work in so that you can move a little bit. You'll also need some paper to make some notes and write something down towards the end. So today we are focusing on the particular skill of mime, which is a kind of drama that we've done a lot of in the past, and you will be learning about a particular genre of drama called slapstick comedy. So by the end of this lesson, you will have done some mime and you will have learned a bit about slapstick comedy. To start off with, as we usually do, a knowledge retrieval task, and this will take you about 5 minutes. So we have been using mime as a technique since the beginning of year 7. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about all the work we've done in the past on mime. And quite simply, on your piece of paper, I'd like you to note down as many things as you can remember about how we mime effectively. How do you make a piece of mime effective? How do you do it well? So I'd like you to pause this presentation, jot down your answers, and then when you're ready, restart. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next slide in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so here are just a few ideas about how to mime effectively. There are others that you might have got. First one, most obvious one, don't speak. A pure mime is silent. Now, sometimes we will speak when we're miming if we're trying to communicate a particular idea as part of a bigger piece of drama. So sometimes speaking within a piece of mime is fine, but the purest form of mime is absolutely silent. Mime does require a degree of control over movement. If you're going to convince someone that you're doing something or you're holding something when that place is not there or the object isn't there, then control of your movement, thinking about how you would actually do the thing. So, for example, if you're miming drinking from a glass, you need to think about the physics of that glass. How big is it? How heavy is it? How does the liquid move in it? And that will affect the way that your hand moves. Similarly, if you're miming a situation where your character might be looking down from a great height, even though you're just on the floor, you need to think, how might you actually move? How would you look if you were at the top of a very tall building or a high chasm? Mime, to a certain extent, relies upon exaggeration, not really over the top exaggeration, although we'll be talking about that a little bit later, but just slightly what we might call hyper real, something slightly beyond the realistic, just to emphasize what's going on. So, exaggeration, making your facial expression, making your body language a lot more extreme, can really help communicate what you're doing. So thinking about body language, that can be very important as well. If you're working in a group, if you're working with other people, you do need to think about where you are in relation to those other people, what's called proxemics, because that can communicate quite a lot to your audience. So thinking about how you relate to other people that you're working with, that can communicate a lot. And similarly, we've talked a lot about emotion and mood in not just the last few weeks, but over the course of your drama experience. And being able to physically and facially communicate how you feel, what your mood is, what your emotions are, these can be very important when it comes to mime. So these are just a few of the ways that we have used mime in the past. As I say, you might have thought of some others. So to introduce this topic, I'm going to start off by asking you to watch a short clip which includes one of the most famous comedians of all time. Now, you will probably have heard of this man, even if you've never seen any of his work. He was one of the most famous men in the world in the early part of the 20th century. He's a man called Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin, in case you don't know, was a British comedian who became very, very successful in Hollywood. And he was, for a time, probably the most famous comedian, possibly one of the most famous actors in the world. And his style of comedy is very physical. And a lot of physical comedians since Charlie Chaplin have used his style as a model for their comedy. So what I want you to do is I want you to watch the clip and then answer the questions below in full sentences. Now, because of the way these videos work, what you're going to have to do is click the link. Now, you can't do it off the video, but what I'll try and do is I'll try and put the link in the description for the video. It'll also be in the documents on Cinema Engagement. So you need to click the link, watch the video, then answer the questions. The first question is, what makes this funny? Now, I'm hoping you find it funny, but what, even if you don't find it hilariously side-splittingly funny, it's meant to be funny. So what is being done in this clip to try and make the audience laugh? That's the first thing. So write down your answers to that question. The second question, in Charlie Chaplin's facial expression, what sort of things is he doing? Try and pick a couple of examples of things that Chaplin does with his face to try and communicate comedy, to try and make things fun. And thirdly, what do you notice about how Chaplin moves, his gesture, what he does with his arms, what he does with his body, how he actually moves? Again, how is this supposed to be funny? So what I'd like you to do now is I'd like to pause this video. What should happen is if you accidentally click off this, you should be able to get back to it. What you might want to do actually is you might want to write these questions down beforehand. So you'll need to jot the questions down, pause this video, click on the link in the comments or on the Word document, watch the Chaplin clip, and then come back to this presentation. Okay, so I hope you've managed to find your way back. Your next task is to think about how you might make a piece of mime funny. So, what you'll need to do is you'll need to decide upon an activity you do every day. It might be having a drink, a cup of tea, or brushing your hair, washing your face, doing the washing up, putting your clothes on, something like that. And to start off with, using a mirror or using your camera, mime the activity in a realistic way. Now, if you're feeling particularly virtuous, you could use the mirror to actually do the activity. So you can film yourself washing the dishes or drinking some tea or, obviously brushing your hair, you probably do it in the mirror, and so on and so forth. So actually watch yourself doing it and then try and mime it. So mime brushing your hair without a hairbrush, mime drinking the tea without a mug. It shouldn't take you more than a few seconds. Once you've done that, once you've worked out how you would do it normally, try making it funny. Try exaggerating it a bit. Make the movements a bit bigger, make your facial expressions a bit more exaggerated, extreme. Try and make it something which looks a little bit over the top. And then once you've done that, do it again. Do it a third time. And this time, make it really big, really crazy, really like if you really had the cup of tea, the tea would be sloshing all over the place. If you were really washing your face, the water would be everywhere. So really make it as big and as mad as you possibly can. And if you are feeling particularly brave, and you don't have to do this, and I appreciate that some of you won't want to do this, show it to somebody. Show it to your parent or your guardian or to a sibling. See what they think. Does it make them laugh? Is it funny? That's a big question. So have a go at that. Pause this presentation. Have a go at doing your mime. When you're ready, once you've done it, once you've had a go, move on to the next bit. So I'm going to move on to the next slide in 3, 2, 1. So the kind of comedy we're going to look at is called slapstick. Slapstick comedy is a particular kind of physical comedy, and basically it involves being deliberately clumsy to cause embarrassment, usually to the comedian. Slapstick comedy requires certain techniques to make it work. It requires over exaggeration, requires excellent comic timing to make the humor work. It's very physical, so you need to be very physically skilled, very physically fit. You need to be very, very, very well rehearsed because action and reaction are vital. It does depend a lot upon an actor controlling and exaggerating their facial expression, their suggestion, their body language. And if you've seen a pantomime, you will have seen examples of slapstick comedy. The classic example is the clown getting a custard pie in their face. And the etymology of slapstick is quite interesting because it actually comes from a physical prop. You see a picture of one there, which is basically a stick, a hinged stick with like a kind of paddle on it. And this was a thing called a slapstick. And it was used in the 16th and 17th centuries to create the sound of somebody being hit without actually hitting them. And that's really very important with slapstick. It might look as if the actors are actually hitting each other or causing each other pain. They really aren't. The secret to good slapstick is rehearsal, making sure that you don't actually hurt anybody. The reason for that is basically it's just acting. You don't want someone to get hurt. And quite often, when we're watching slapstick comedy routines, in reality, if actors did the things that we think they're doing to each other, they would be quite seriously hurt. And that isn't funny. So the reason things like slapsticks were invented was to prevent actors from being hurt. So we're going to be looking at slapstick comedy. Please be careful. So what I'd like you to imagine here is how you might make these forthcoming actions slapstick. How might you make them over the top, over exaggerated, physically humorous. Now, it's really important that you find a space where you're not going to knock anything over, break it, or you're not going to hit anybody. So please be sensible. Please think very carefully about the space that you have available to you. So don't be waving your arms around madly if you're in a very small space. So, like we did before, you're going to start off miming these actions in a realistic way. You're going to think about how you might do them in reality. And then what you're going to do is you are going to exaggerate them. You're going to make them physically funny. So you need to think, how might these actions, how might these activities be made to be more over the top, extreme? How might your reactions be extreme? So, as I say, you need to make sure that you're careful. Please don't be doing these in a space where you're going to knock into somebody, where you're going to knock into something. So, the activities are these. The first one's blowing up a balloon. The second is trying to pick up a coin that's stuck to the floor. The third is somebody getting ready to go out. So, to start off with each of those activities, I want to think about how you do it. Realistically, how you realistically blow a balloon. Imagine seeing a coin stuck on the floor. How would you bend down and pick that up? Getting ready to go out. You might have already done this in the earlier activity. How would you do that in a realistic way? And then massively over exaggerate it. Make it funny. How would you do it if you were really clumsy? Things kept going wrong. Maybe you keep blowing the balloon up and it keeps going down again. Maybe you keep blowing the balloon up, it pops. So you have to blow another balloon up and that pops. Maybe the coin keeps nearly coming and then somehow it gets stuck back on the floor again. Maybe the glue's really rubbery. Maybe you keep accidentally putting your arm through holes in the wrong holes in your jacket, or the wrong holes in your trousers, or whatever. So have a go at those activities, and then when you're ready, move on to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next slide in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the next thing I want you to do, again, you'll need a bit of space here. I want you to imagine that you have a big block of wood, a big, like a crate-sized block, and you need to move that block. But you don't know this. The block is stuck to the ground, absolutely immovable. The first thing you need to do is, quite simply, you need to create a freeze frame, still image of you trying to move the block. So basically, obviously the block isn't there. You've got to imagine it's there. You just need to stand in a way that makes it look like you're trying to move the block. So you've not got the block there. So think about how you look, your facial expression. Think about what you do with your hands. You're trying to push the thing. Think about the body language. How might you show that you're putting a bit of effort in to move this thing? It's not moving. Think about where you might position yourself. Find yourself a space and hold yourself in that position. Once you've done that, then you're going to turn this into a mind. You need to think of the different ways you might try and move the block. Where might you position yourself? Might you move around the block? Might you try and hold it from the top or the bottom, the middle? Might you try and grasp it from either side? Might you try and push it, pull it? Try and turn this into a funny little story. Think about what the block is. Why are you trying to move it? Where are you trying to move it to? Think about how your facial expression might change. The more frustrated you get, the more cross you get, the more confused you get. Why isn't this block moving? Think about how you might show your frustration through your body language, or how your hands, or your shoulders, how your arms might move. Think about how, as this goes on, you get more and more physically engaged with this block. So, once you've created your freeze frame, have a go at creating a short mime. Remember, you need to stay safe, so you need to make sure you have a reasonable amount of space. Please be careful. Please don't knock anything over. Hopefully you've had a go at the mime. So move on to the next slide in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So now the last activity is you're going to make up, you're going to create your own idea for a slapstick situation. So you will need to jot down your ideas. You're not actually acting this out. This is effectively a description of a situation. So you will need to decide, this is the bit you're going to send to me or Miss Bell. You need to write down first the setting. Where is your scene going to take place? Secondly, who is involved in the scene. And you can have more than one character. In fact, I recommend that you have at least two. What they are doing and why it might be funny. So what is the activity in mind? And you need to give 3 examples of the kind of slapstick action that an audience would see. So 3 moments of slapstick comedy, physically over the top, over exaggerated comedy that depends upon mime and movement. So you need to think about all these ideas that we've been discussing over the course of this lesson, what their faces are doing, their gesture, what they're doing with their hands, what they're doing with their body language, how you'd make it over exaggerated, where you would put your actors to make this fun. So, I've got another clip for you to look at, and um, hopefully this will give you some ideas. And this is from 2 comedians called Laurel and Hardy. Laurel and Hardy were a bit like Charlie Chaplin. They were contemporaries of Charlie Chaplin. They were both, again, physical comedians. They started off in silent movies and then broke into talkies in the early part of the 20th century. And they were again famous for their comic routines, which often involved a lot of physical incidents. And the particular clip I'd like you to watch is a clip where they are in the process of building a house. So again, as with the Charlie Chaplin clip earlier, you're probably going to have to click off this presentation to watch the clip and watch it up to about the 7-minute point. And then when you've watched the clip, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to come back to this presentation and you can see an example on the next slide of what I would like you to do. So basically you can see my version of a slapstick scene. So once you've watched the Lauren Hardy clip, come back to this PowerPoint. Welcome back. So this is an example of what I would like you to do. This is my slapstick scene. I'm setting it in a science laboratory. A very good place for obviously explosions and things getting broken and liquid spilling everywhere. Obviously in real life it would be really dangerous, but in a slapstick comedy anything goes. So my characters are 2 scientists. This is a laboratory, that's where you find scientists. We've got Dr. Smith and Dr. Jones. In my idea, Dr. Smith is kind of like the straight man or the straight person. Dr. Jones is more the kind of clumsy character. So the humour comes from not being quite sure how Dr. Jones is going to mess up Dr. Smith's reactions. They're doing an experiment involving various chemicals. So Dr. Smith is mixing the chemicals, Dr. Jones is collecting the chemicals and the equipment. He keeps getting things wrong, which makes Dr. Smith feel more and more and more frustrated, and that's where the comedy comes from. So, I'm giving one example of slapstick action here. I want you to do 3. So, my first example is to do with Dr. Smith sending Dr. Jones to get the flasks that Dr. Smith wants to use in the experiment. Dr. Jones keeps getting the wrong size flask, and the humour comes from the increasingly irate expressions and movement of Dr. Smith. So every time Dr. Smith sees the wrong flask, he gets more and more angry. Dr. Jones doesn't understand why she's angry because he thinks he's getting the right flasks. The problem is, as Dr. Smith gets angry, her gestures get more and more extreme, more exaggerated, and because of that, she points at the wrong flask. Dr. Smith gets the wrong flask. He thinks it's the right flask. So Dr. Jones gets the wrong flask. Gets the right, and Dr. Smith doesn't realise why Dr. Jones is getting the wrong flask. Dr. Jones, he's more and more confused. He doesn't understand why Dr. Smith's getting angry because he is getting the flasks that he thinks she wants. And the sort of the gag at the end of this scene, eventually Dr. Jones brings the right flask. Dr. Smith is so happy that she accidentally drops it. We think it's going to break, but because it's a slapstick comedy, the laws of physics don't apply. The flask bounces and it bounces back onto the shelf where it originally was. Both Dr. Smith and Dr. Jones look really confused. So that is one example of a slapstick routine. I'd like you to come up with 3 that fit in with your scenario. And that is your main written task for this lesson. So once you have completed that task, as per usual, I want you to send your work to either myself, to Miss Bell, and we will look forward to receiving your slapstick comedy situations as soon as you. Thank you very much, and we will speak to you again next